first and foremost, I'm really appreciative of the effort Francisco and his representatives and our ownership put into the process of trying to find alignment. We spent quite a bit of time together over the course of the last few months to try to find a way if we can to see if we could make something work. And that was a sincere and earnest effort by both Francisco and his representative David Meter, as well as our ownership. And I think we had a series of great exchanges and tried different creative concepts to make things work, but ultimately weren't able to align at this point. So I think we talked with Francisco and David about just focusing on the season at this point, and then revisiting things down the road.
Do you feel like the talks that you guys had gives you a base to go back to at some point in time to possibly?
I think the dialogue was really helpful. I think we shared from the beginning that we have a sincere interest in trying to find a way to extend Francisco's time in Cleveland. He was really consistent in his interest in trying to make that happen as well. Ultimately, we couldn't get to the finish line. We couldn't overlap on value, but it wasn't because of lack of effort. And we are greatly appreciative of the time and energy they spent trying to find that common ground. And I know I'm sincerely appreciative of the effort and time and resources that our ownership was willing to extend to make that happen as well.
Are you concerned in any way how this will impact how he'll play this year?
I have no concerns at all.
Okay, why not? Because some people do get...
Yeah, the way Francisco's handled the entire process and his entire time as an Indian gives me all the confidence in the world that he'll be able to focus on what's in front of him and what's on the field. And that's just who he is. He's always been consistent in those behaviors in the past. He talked about that throughout this process, that it was most important for him to try to help lead the team in a way that would help us win a World Series. And he didn't want this to be a distraction from that.
That's Chris Antonetti talking about Francisco Lindor. A couple of things. They couldn't get across the finish line. Yeah, if you changed your mind and wrote a check, you could get across the finish line. I didn't expect them to do that, so that's not a surprise. On the other hand, Antonetti, Paul Dolan, anybody else involved in the front office, you're going to hear the cheap comments and all that other stuff. But just because you don't write a check for $300 million, I don't think that makes you cheap. And I don't know why all of the heat is going to come to Paul Dolan when this all shakes out if Francisco doesn't have a change of mind here. You never hear it about the player. You always hear it about the owner or the general manager.
And when you look at Christian Yelich up in Milwaukee, he just signed a 9-year deal with, I think, about 180 million, 177 million, somewhere like that.
Right. That's a different story. He was coming off a different contract.
But I'm saying he probably could have gotten more money as a free agent, but he's going to find a way to get by on like 20 million a year.
Yeah, but Francisco Lindor is arguably one of the top 3 players in baseball.
Right.
Based on the position he plays.
Right.
Also.
Yeah. Right. He's a shortstop, an excellent shortstop, and I think really no one is at fault here. Why do we have to blame?
Good point.
I mean, you can't blame Francisco Lindor for wanting to get as much money as he can.
Right.
And
under the rules.
And you can't blame the Indians for saying we just can't afford that.
Right. Neither can 27 other teams in Major League Baseball.
Right. As long as he doesn't end up with the Yankees, we'll be all right. But so that's really it. You can't blame Dolan cannot wrap up 30 to 35, probably 30 million will probably be below what he would. You'll get like 35 million a year.
Yeah, that's 350 million for 10 years.
Right, and by the time he's a free agent, he could get that kind of money, and
by the way, I can't think of any 10-year signee who's made it through all 10 years at the top of his game.
Right.
Either injuries or a couple of bad years somewhere along the line.
And he told us before Tribe Fest that his game won't decline in 10 years. Well, of course, he believes that, I'm sure.
Right.
But you look at Miguel Cabrera, you think the Tigers wish they hadn't done that right now?
I don't know. At the time when they were winning pennants, or at
Right.
least they were pretty happy about it.
Right.
But that's the price you pay. You pay for 4 bad years. And in Miguel Cabrera's case, because of his weight and a couple of other things, he's, out of the 10 years, 3, 4, or 5 are not going to be good ones.
Right. And I think that Francisco Lindor believes this. He says, well, you could pay me what he wants. And no, he believes this. And because he said, like, the Indians' payroll last year was about $120 million. He says, well, you could pay me and then pay everybody else on the team like $90 million, and then you'd still be at $120 million.
Right.
Well, okay.
And you wouldn't be able to sign too many players.
Right. And okay, that sounds like a great plan. But Clevenger's going to come into some big money here. Bieber's going to come into money.
And somebody will say, well, Kluber, they save on Kluber money. No, not really.
Right. And that money's going to be gobbled up because Lindor says, well, I'm making $17.5 million now. So you just add $13 million or so, get to that $30 million mark,
Right.
and just distribute the rest of it around. And then the Indians wouldn't be able to go get somebody else because they'd be locked into that contract. So I don't blame anybody.
Here's the difference between Lindor and anybody else who's up on the market. And that is, number one, he's a special generational player. That's number one. Number two, he's not going to be affected. Antonetti talked about it before. He's not going to be affected by the fact that contract talks are on hold and they'll be thinking about it all the time. He won't be affected by that. And number three, there's not a team in baseball that wouldn't want the guy.
Oh, for sure. And
now, they might not be able to afford it, but
Right.
they all think he'd be at the top of their list.
Right. And still, and let's look at when you go out and lay out all that money, that doesn't guarantee you anything.
No.
The Phillies, they spent a lot of money in this past offseason, didn't get anything for it.
Yeah, Bryce Harper.
And
And Bryce Harper's team won it all.
yeah, the team that got rid of him,
Yeah.
you're right, won it all. And the Padres go out and get Machado.
Yeah,
And,
but you knew that was a bad deal.
right, and that didn't help them do
No.
anything. And if they think people are going to flock to the stadium to watch him, I'm not sure what the Padres' attendance was, but the point is it did not make them a winner. Because as good as he is, he only bats once every 9 times.
Right.
And yes, he saves runs at shortstop. I'm talking about Lindor, but
You can pitch around him.
yeah,